What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the top 10 British comedy films of all time. Now, here in America, Britain is not only known for tea and fish and chips, but it's also known for its comedy. British comedy. It's basically its own genre, like its own style. It's its own word, British comedy. It's sarcastic and introspective and a little bit dark sometimes, and slapstick and just uniquely British. So today, I'm very excited to learn about the greatest British comedy films because although as Americans we have a sense of British comedy, to be completely honest, I think there's a ton of British comedy we don't get exposed to. Like I think a lot of Americans have know about the Office and Monty Python. And that's about it. You know, I've seen some clips here and there on YouTube, but yeah, I expect that most of these British comedy films I've never even heard of before. So this is a video by Watch Mojo UK, top 10 British comedy films ever. Let's take a look.
Number 10, In the Loop.
Lesson 1, I tell you to f*** off, what do?
We're starting off a little left
my
field with
God.
a contemporary comedy about politics. After the British cabinet minister makes a controversial remark about war in the Middle East, political advisors come rushing in to clean up, one of which is Malcolm Tucker. Yes, the same Malcolm Tucker from the series The Thick of It.
What? I have never heard of this before. Is this... See, I think this list is going to be a mixture of, like, older films and newer films, contemporary films. This is like... I don't know when this came out. I actually recognize some of these British actors. That's Doctor Who there. What an interesting premise for a movie. It's like a political comedy.
Cabinet Minister. Yeah. I didn't get here by screwing up every media appearance I ever had.
With ruthless satire coming out of its ears, it will appeal to those who frequently get frustrated by the farce of bureaucratic faff.
I get it now. Satire about politics and government and bureaucracy and that actually does sound funny.
Like international relations, for example.
No, hang on, for a start! Turn that rocket off!
Turn it off.
Number 9,
We could... Wow, perfect example of something I don't even think... Like, we wouldn't even attempt this in the United States. I don't think we have the temperament to make fun of ourselves in that way. Like how we do government and bureaucracy, even though it is like a joke at times and it's ripe for comedy. I love that Britain is willing to poke fun at something like that, because that's kind of what comedy is for, right? Okay, The Full Monty. I've heard that before, The Full Monty. I've heard that name before. I have no idea what it is, though.
The Full Monty. To a film about unemployed steelworkers turned amateur male strippers next.
What? What now? What? No, that is not the premise, no. Steel workers turned strippers? Is that what they said?
Stay with us. Crude on the surface, but superbly written nonetheless, The Full Monty stars the likes of Robert Carlyle, Mark Addy, and Tom Wilkinson, who with the
Okay.
help of a killer soundtrack and some revealing underwear, aim to keep themselves financially afloat. Filled with memorable visuals, dialogue, and music, the latter of which it won an Oscar for, it's stripped back comedy.
It won an Oscar? Is that why I've heard of this? The Full Monty? I had no idea this was a British comedy about strippers. I'm shocked.
At its best.
Whoa!
Number 8, The Return of the Pink Panther.
The Return of the Pink Panther? Is there a regular Pink Panther? This is another one. I feel like this is going to be a trend today. Like, I think I've heard of a lot of this stuff because they're really famous movies or films, but I've never seen them and I don't know what they're about, and I didn't know they're British. Because I've heard of the Pink Panther. The Return of the Pink Panther, I don't know about that.
Well, if there is a lady, it must be a lid.
What?
One of many films in the Inspector Clouseau saga,
What?
this film features Peter Sellers as the titular detective, who's half Sherlock Holmes and half Charlie Chaplin.
This is like a detective comedy? Interesting. I've heard of the Pink Panther. I've never seen it. This is one of those films. Not the first, because this is the Return of the Pink Panther.
How was I to know he was the bank manager?
How were you to know the bank was being robbed?
That is correct.
What is correct?
I did not know the bank was being robbed.
With scenes excruciating
What is that accent? What is that accent supposed to be, by the way?
frustrating yet hilarious to watch, it's
Is it French? Is that like the most ridiculous French accent ever? Maybe.
a classic example of slapstick humour and of Sellers' comic abilities. Whether he's trying to pronounce a difficult word, find out where his servant is hiding, or analysing a crime scene, you can always expect him to cock it up. Number 7.
God. Okay. That's another thing British comedy does that is kind of a lost art in America is physical comedy. I think you get a bit of that with like people like Will Ferrell, but like what's the last comedy he was in? And like Adam Sandler. But I'm going like back in time at this point. I think British comedy does physical comedy really amazingly. Okay, number 7, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. I'm gonna say it again. I think I've heard that name before. 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Doesn't sound like a comedy to me.
4 Weddings and a Funeral.
To take thee, Lydia Jane Hibbert, to be my awful wedded wife.
Loads of films offer a
What?
taste of British humour, but nothing quite taps into the farce of British culture as effectively as 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
You like this girl, don't you?
Less about the eponymous events themselves and more about the tricky relationships that surround them, it's a film packed with awkward social situations.
The first time.
That's British. that's right there. British comedy. Awkward social situations. That about spells it out right there.
In my whole life, I realized I totally and utterly loved one person.
With Hugh Grant in the leading role and a supporting cast that includes Andy McDowell and John Hannah, it's funny
Okay.
and often exceptionally cringy to watch, with awful best man speeches and knockout ceremonies.
When Bernard told me he was getting engaged to Lydia, I congratulated him because all his other girlfriends had been such complete dogs.
Number 6, Kind Hearts and Coronets.
Okay. So far, these look like really good, which makes sense because these are supposedly the best British comedy films ever. So this is good. Kind Hearts and Coronets. This looks to be like in black and white. Old. Never seen it. Doesn't mean it's bad. Never heard of it before.
It's not often you associate comedy with a killing spree, but that's what this film's all about.
What?
It stars Dennis Price as Louis Mazzini, the 10th Duke of Chalfont, who seeks revenge on the aristocratic Gascoigne family for disowning his mother. Vowing to claim his dukedom, he decides to bump off all those that stand in his way, including
What?
almost 10 members of the Gascoigne family.
This really is a comedy about murder. It's almost like intriguing in a way.
All amusingly played by Alec Guinness. Elaborate kills, nail-biting near misses, and
Alec Guinness. Did he play Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars? I don't think I've ever seen him in any other role.
first-rate comic timing by Guinness make this a must-watch for any old-school comedy fan.
Bravo, Edith!
Number 5, A Fish Called Wanda.
What? What? What are these names? What? I don't know if these are well known or not. I assume they are in Britain. I've never heard of a fish called Wanda. If I heard that name, I'm not sure I would have chosen that movie to watch just based on the name.
И борется, и плачется, и так легко, легко.
From two of the famous
Right on cue. Right on cue. Awkward social situations. I just realized that is like the perfect explanation of so much British comedy. Awkward, cringe social situations.
Pythons, John Cleese and Michael Palin, comes a feature film about a diamond heist and the comedy of errors that follows.
Okay.
Written by Cleese, it's crammed full of intelligent wordplay and varied characters, including an Anglophobic Kevin Kline, stuttering Palin, and flirtatious Jamie Lee Curtis.
Which hotel?
Okay.
Although ridiculous throughout, it still manages to deliver an engrossing plot, and some of Cleese and Palin's best moments on screen.
Stupid jerk. I mean, what the are you doing? Robbing your own house, you asshole! You stupid, stiff, pompous English...
But Kline steals the show, and actually won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his efforts.
Really?
I love watching your ass when you walk. Is that beautiful or what?
Number 4, The
Oh my god. Okay. The Lady Killers. I've definitely heard of this before. I've heard this name. Man, this is great. Like, today I'm learning about so many movies that I've heard the name of and never bothered to learn what it is and never seen it. The Lady Killers. I've heard that.
The Lady Killers.
Professor.
A sweet old lady and a gang of conniving criminals, an
What?
uneven match. Think again.
So much of these British comedies, I don't know if it's coincidence or what, are based around, like, robbing banks, heists, murder. Like, this one is about burglars. Like, is that where the comedy really lies?
Serial manipulator Professor Marcus, played again by Alec Guinness, needs a HQ for a robbery he's planning, so he uses the old lady's spare room.
No, Professor.
What?
You didn't tell me the truth about yourself and these other gentlemen.
Dodging her suspicions and her parrots by posing as a string quintet, he embarks on an elaborate ruse which is a little darker than some other Ealing comedies, but it's got bundles of laughs all the same.
Just hearing the premise of some of these films for the very first time is so funny. Like, I can see why they're good movies. Like, you know, we don't have time to sit down and watch the entire movie, so I'm just getting a small snippet of what these films are about and some of the jokes. You know, there's only so much I'll understand in a short amount of time, but like a gang of burglars staying in her extra room, posing as a string quartet. What more do you need to know?
Still don't think it can be said to be enough justification.
And who said it needed a remake? We certainly didn't. What we will say though is hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.
Oh, there's a remake? Oh no. There's a remake. Oh, I don't know how British people feel about that. Probably. Remaking comedies. You should never remake a comedy, I think. Somehow that just feels bad.
And if you do, we will petition for rubbish remakes never to be made again. Probably.
I'm so very sorry. I propose that we consider this matter closed.
Number 3, Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead! This is 20 years old? Oh my god. I've seen one of these movies! I've seen Shaun of the Dead, with Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost, right? I know some things. I love this movie. I saw this movie 20 years ago. Oh my god, is that true? Jeez. Oh my god. This is one of my exposures to British comedy. This is one of my only exposures to British comedy. And I think a lot of Americans is Shaun of the Dead. Super comedy zombie movie. Like, it taught me that you can make comedies about anything, any topic, if you do it correctly. Like a zombie apocalypse.
Ensure all residences are secure with all doors and windows firmly locked and barricaded.
We could have chosen either of the hugely successful entries in the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, but we've opted for the debut effort.
Oh, thank God for that.
Drawing on all the zombie apocalypse cliches you can think of, from holding up in a safe house to using everyday household items as weapons, Shaun of the Dead offers the perfect balance of satirical humour and horror.
God, I haven't seen this movie in so long. I'm feeling like nostalgic for this movie. This really is like 20 years ago, or whenever I first saw this, one of my first exposures to like British comedy, and being like, wow, this is unique. Like, this comedy is so darn good and different and British. I think this movie is special for a lot of Americans around my age.
Okay, John, it's time at the bar.
Together with snappy editing and the excellent directorial eye of Edgar Wright, it's one of the UK's best loved films, and for a very good reason.
Yes. That for a slice of fried gold.
Yeah, boy!
Number 2, Withnail and I.
Okay, Withnail and I've never heard of it.
I'm making time.
A slightly different look at the British countryside next, with Bruce Robinson's cult classic about two struggling actors, played by Richard E. Grant and Paul McGann.
Well, I swear, I've looked into it. Listen to me. There are things in there. There's a tea bag.
This film really is endlessly quotable, giving us an insight into the dingy, dirty, and decrepit lives of two guys who are either drinking themselves stupid, getting high, or generally complaining about life's injustices.
I'll say this again. British comedies touch on topics that are so much more interesting than American comedies. That's what I'm noticing. American comedies are so, like, I don't know, straightforward. Like, very obvious jokes and story and funny topic. Whereas these British comedies inject humor into serious situations, like people doing drugs and committing crimes and losing their jobs and murdering people and fighting zombies. I think that's why it's so special. It's so much more difficult, and yet it's done so masterfully.
I called him a ponce, and now I'm calling you one. Ponce!
Taking a trip to the countryside, they clash with the locals, kill chickens, tangle with horny bulls, and meet the slightly uncouth Uncle Monty.
Shut up, Whitnell.
Run at it, shouting!
Do as he says, start shouting.
Number 1, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Okay. Number 1, this makes sense. I've heard of this. I've never seen this movie, I have to be honest. I missed out on the Monty Python and the Holy Grail bandwagon. A lot of Americans have seen this film, I know. A lot of Americans love this film, quote this film. I know this is very famous, probably the most famous British film in American history. I think. I could be wrong, but it's the one I've heard about growing up. Never saw it, though. Maybe that's overdue.
What is your quest? I seek the Grail. What is your favorite color? Blue.
Let's be honest, we could have easily had all three of Monty Python's feature-length big hitters claiming the podium spots on this list.
They have 3 movies? Oh my god. I know there's like a TV show, right? Flying Circus? I did a video looking at some Flying Circus clips from the show. That was very funny. But there's 3 movies as well?
But we've decided to roll with the troops' take on the legend of King Arthur.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary. 'Tis but a scratch.
This is the scene I've seen on YouTube and social media, fighting this Black Knight, chopping his arm off. Like, I've not seen this movie, but I've heard about and seen clips from this scene in particular.
Injecting their infectious comedy into every facet of medieval life, it plays out like a seamlessly linked chain of entertaining skits, all wrapped up in an absurd narrative.
If she was...
From the she's a witch scene to the limbless Black Knight, it's typical Python and it's absolutely timeless. Do you agree with all?
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That was great. I'm so glad to have finally learned about a lot of these films that I've heard the name of. So they are famous. They have made their way to the United States even, in some shape or form. Maybe in name only. And today I feel like I finally know what they are about and have a much better idea of, I don't know, these top British comedy films. This was great. This was funny. Very enjoyable. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the greatest British comedy films. If you agreed with this list, if you didn't, that'd be fun to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain and learning about British culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.